Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to Denver, and thanks to coming to our community and members meeting. The title is interesting, and we'll talk more about it later. But welcome to Denver. Welcome to NANOG 52. I'm Steve Feldman. I am the chair of the board of directors of NewNOG, Inc. and NANOG, and that's something else we can talk about while we're here. So, first of all, why are we even here? Why aren't you outside enjoying the sunshine? We're here because this is your opportunity to interact with the leadership of NANOG, and the membership and the community can all get together and learn about what it is that we're trying to do, why we're doing it, and help guide us in the right direction. It's important to remember that we are here to represent you. The community is NANOG, and what our job is to carry out the wishes of what you, the community, wants from us. Format here. We'll be giving some really short updates as to what's been going on and trying to leave lots of time for open dialogue. And this note has been in every community meeting for the last number of years because it's important. This is a meeting for all of us. We want to dialogue rather than a lecture. So if you have a comment, a suggestion, criticism, whatever, please step up to the microphones and let us know what you're thinking. We are going to try to speed through the actual presentation parts to leave more time for dialogue at the end, or at the party if that's what you'd rather. So if you have a specific question about what we're presenting, please get up and ask it, but general stuff, if we can delay it to the end, we'll leave that to your discussion. So here is the short list of things that we want to talk about while we're here today. Hopefully we can speed through most of these and make them pretty quick. So I'm going to talk a bit about the structure of NewNOG, NANOG, what the various groups are, what they do. Board of Directors is the Board of Directors. We are responsible as elected representatives of the community for making sure that NANOG actually carries out its mission. We have the fiduciary responsibility of making sure that we make money, that we spend it properly, and that we leave an organization that is sustainable. The program committee is responsible for probably the most important piece of this, and that is making sure that you have something useful and interesting to do over the next 3 days while you're here. Development committee, also important. Without them, we wouldn't have cookies or lights or anything like that. They're responsible for finding all the sponsors that we have that make this meeting a success, and you'll hear a lot more later about what they've done for this meeting and what they've done for the organization as a whole. Be pretty amazed. It's some great stuff. We have a finance and budget committee that's responsible for the finance and budget. Hear a bit from them. And we have a communications committee which is responsible for a lot of the technical aspects, not only the mailing list, the websites and all that, but their role is going to be growing and to handle pretty much all of the technical aspects of organizational and meeting support, the management of those, I should say. The actual operations aspects, we actually have a contractor who's going to be doing a lot of that for us, and again, you'll hear a bit more about that in a few minutes. Next up, I'll invite Dave to give a update on what the program committee's been doing for you.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. It's great to be here. Great to see all of you. I want to make mine fast. Generally, I don't have a slide. I have to thank Betty for that. She made this one. No bar charts or pie charts or anything like that. So I did want to mention that at this NANOG, we'd had an unbelievably great amount of content that people have provided. So if you were one of those people, thank you very much. And if you're not one of those people, think about doing it for the next NANOG. The call for presentations is going to be up on the NANOG 53 website I hope by the end of the week or maybe early next week. But in any event, please participate by providing your interests and your talks to the community. I think everybody would appreciate and does appreciate that. We had a few things that went on this time around that I thought we might, just kind of we don't have to discuss this here, but I wanted to kind of raise this with all of you. So if you see a board member or somebody who's on the PC and you have a feeling or a kind of opinion on this, let us know. The first one is somebody wanted to do a panel, but all the panelists couldn't be here, and so what they wanted to do was like remote, using some kind of technology. I don't know what it was, any of the ones available, and that ran into a lot of discussion both with the community members that we spoke to and on the PC itself. So the point here is, if you have an opinion on this, like if you think that the panelists should figure out how to get to NANOG, then let us know. And if you think it'd be okay not to have them here and maybe we could do it through some other AV mechanism, let us know. The other one that came up was, this has come up a couple of times in the time I've been doing this, and it came up this time, and the issue here is, should we as a community require that speakers allow their materials to be posted, both the video, their slides, and so forth. We've had times when speakers have said, mostly retroactively, please take my slides down, but we're trying to be kind of a transparent organization, and we think that if people give talks here, or many of us do, we think that if people give talks here, it should be open and transparent and archived. But we're interested in what you have to, your thinking on that. So, and you're the ones who are going to benefit or not, as the case may be, from that. And then the last thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is, if you're a first-time attendee, please think about attending the newcomers breakfast, which, by the way, is kind of misnamed. We need to fix that up. Everybody's welcome, and in fact, if some of the people who have been around for a while were to show up, they'd get breakfast, but they'd also be able to have an opportunity to interact with new people at NANOG, mentor them about what it's about, and pass on some of their wisdom. So please do that. And then the last thing on this is, we're trying to generate a little bit of intelligence about how the newcomers and the first-time attendees of NANOG are feeling about the conference and about their experience here. So in our first attempt to do that, we're going to have a newcomers debrief on Wednesday. And that was mainly for newcomers, but if people who aren't newcomers want to come, that's also fine. So take a look at the agenda for that stuff, and if you can show up, do so. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Dave. And I forgot to do this earlier, but if are any PC members out there, please stand up so that people can see who you are. And if you have, the rest of you, if you have any questions about the program or how the PC works, or if you're interested in volunteering, since we have a new round of selections coming up in the fall, please talk to any of the people who are wearing the whatever colored badges PC has today. White, I guess? Okay. Well, talk to the PC members. They'll be glad to talk to you. And also, I meant to do this earlier, but the board members are actually all up here in the front row. If you want to talk to us about any of the things we've talked about here or anything else that you have about NANOG, please seek us out. We've got the blue badges on, and we're here to work for you, so please talk to us. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about what the board's been doing in the last few months. It's not all glamour and fun, I will tell you, but we have actually accomplished a few things. One of the things that we've got done over the last few months is we finally received our 501c3 nonprofit status approval from the IRS. So we are actually a charity organization, an educational charitable organization, which means that if you want to make donations, they're tax deductible. It doesn't necessarily, I'm not a tax attorney, so I can't tell you for sure, but you might want to see if your dues are deductible or not. But that puts us in a good position going forward. We're a real nonprofit. We've actually filed a tax return, and we're real. Speaking of being real, the trademark transfer from Merit was completed. So NANOG is us now. We are NANOG. That's it. NANOG is the community. We own the domain. We own the lovely logo that you see at the top of the screen there. That's all us. We've put in some applications to get our own address space from Aaron. The approvals have been made. Now they just want money, so we need to figure that part out in the next couple of weeks. But that means that when we have our next meeting in October, we'll have a network. So that's good. And probably the biggest thing that we've done over the last few months is we put out an RFP and reviewed some bids, did a lot of talking to vendors, and have selected AMS as our association management vendor. I don't know if anybody from AMS is out there, but if you see them, you can give them a chance. But they're going to be doing a lot of the back office stuff for us for the next couple of years at least, which means that us on the board maybe don't need to spend as much time with sharp pencils and everything. But that's a big step going forwards. Again, it's a part of the growth of ourselves as an organization. So we're thrilled. Some of you might know AMS. They also provide similar services for the IETF and some other organizations out there in our fields and others. So that's a big step for us. On the other hand, we're not all done. We have some other things that we need to work on. One of the things is trying to figure out what to do with this meeting going forward. One of the things we'd like to hear from you afterwards, and maybe on the survey or maybe in person, is what you think of this community meeting. Do we want to keep doing it as it is? Do we want to convert it into more of a members meeting where we give just the typical dry finance reports, things like that? How much of this dialogue do we want to continue? Do we want more or less, same? Let us know. Some of you have asked me, what on earth is up with this NewNOG name? As we mentioned at the beginning, it was intended as a temporary placeholder name as we transition from the old way of doing things to the new one. We didn't own the rights to the name NANOG, so we couldn't use it. So we came up with a cool, catchy name, so thanks IRS for that, to carry us through the transition. Now that we're done, we intend to change the name of the organization, of the corporation, to NANOG. Turns out that as a Delaware corporation, in order to do that, we need to put it before a vote of the membership. So that will be happening during the October election. And after that, we can officially change our name and completely lose NewNOG altogether. In the meantime, we said we'll be filing DBA forms as appropriate so that we can at least use the name in some of our contracts and professional relationships and all that. Another thing that we get to do moving forwards is work on the educational mission that we have here. In particular, a couple of those scholarships that have been ongoing for a while. There's the Abba Huja Scholarship. And for those of you who don't know who Abba was, please talk to us and we'll be glad to tell you. That's a scholarship that's run out of the University of Michigan, and we've been supporting it over the years by providing links to it from the NewNOG homepage, and we will continue doing that. The Postel Scholarship is a joint effort run with us and Aaron and administered by ISOC, and that will continue going forwards. And we have opportunities to come up with some new ways of raising money and distributing it to help people learn about our industry. And we have some ideas, and we welcome other ideas on how we can do that going forward. That's part of the purpose of being a nonprofit organization like we are. So we definitely want to continue that. That's it for the board. Again, if you have more questions about what we're doing, you can get up now or ask them at the end of the presentations. And in the meantime, I will invite Chris up to give us an update on the development working group.
Hello, everyone. Christopher Casada here. So I'm the chair of the Development Committee and membership. We're going to basically be talking about the sponsors that we have for this particular meeting and future meetings as well. One of the big things that we moved towards this year, or this calendar year for our conferences, which includes Denver, Philadelphia, and the upcoming San Diego in February of next year, is that we moved to an annual schedule for our sponsors. We basically had 3 premier sponsors, 2 Diamond and 1 silver sign up for our new programs, and 12 annual meeting sponsors. We'll also be talking about special gifts, member activities, and the NOG Lab as well. So definitely thanks to our host here, Alcatel-Lucent, and their sponsorship and contributions for this particular event, which you will mostly enjoy. The diamond sponsors we had for 2011 through 2012 are Google and NTT. Again, the generous contributions of these companies and their willingness to take our most premier package of sponsorship was most welcome. Again, Alcatel-Lucent, who also joined the ranks of our premier sponsorship and took our first silver sponsorship. They are also attributed to the wonderful social that we're going to basically having tonight, contributing also to the NOG Lab, which I'll talk about later, and lanyards, badges, and our giveaway. These sponsors basically signed up for all the events for 2011 through 2012, as well as the premier sponsors I just mentioned. And again, we thank them for their contributions and their willingness to help support our fledgling nonprofit. The Continental Breakfast sponsors listed here, also participating within our organization and sponsoring us through the Denver event. And the remaining sponsors. You will see them throughout the event. You'll see we have basically given them signage through the halls, and they're also, depending on the whether it's in beer and gear or NOG Lab or the breaks, they'll have signs. I definitely recommend that you have an opportunity to meet with them, whether it's a break table or beer and gear or at the NOG Lab. Without our sponsors, we could not host this wonderful event. The NOG Lab. Here is the architectural diagram, but also our contributors for the NOG Lab. NOG Lab was a endeavor that we took to bring a new sponsorship to NANOG, and it's run very much with an organization that heads up the NOG Lab as a chief scientist. From there, they basically use vendors as engineers to put together the project. I highly recommend you going in there. John Burkowski from Comcast is our chief scientist and sponsor for the event. Also, Alcatel-Lucent, A10, and Eris. They have a wonderful setup in there, and we're going to continue doing this throughout all the remaining NANOGs to come. Membership. So, as you know, we have a membership organization. As members, you can vote, you can make decisions, you can serve on committees. Joining is pretty much cheap, and you do get a discount for joining. There's the link. Most of you know where it is, and I highly recommend that you join. We also have a table close to registration for joining, and come see us. I'll be there. I'll make you join. And starting right now, we basically have 194 active members on our membership, and thank you very much for participating. Again, you know, it's an easy process to join. There's many different forms that you can put in your membership dues, but it's an opportunity for you to help and serve the community. It allows you to vote, again, and also allows you to take part in these events. If NANOG is important to you, I highly recommend you become a member. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, hi there. I'm Dwayne. I'm the treasurer for NewNOG NANOG, and I have a number of slides with dollar signs on them for you to look at. So, Start off with something small. Since the start of the year, we've received $1,000 in donations. These are different than memberships, so these are sort of. Why is that funny?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't remember where the 9 cents came from exactly, but there were some rounding errors, let's say. So here, these numbers here represent the financials for NANOG 51, our last meeting. I'll let you read them. Expenses were slightly less than revenue, which is as we like to have them. So after the end of that meeting, we found ourselves with about $18,000 quote profit, which is nice to have. Here's the breakdown of memberships. These are people that have signed up since January 1st. You can see that the one-year membership is the most popular. 3 years also popular. That's where you start to get the discount, and so on. We've had five students sign up so far, which is great. This slide represents money received from sponsors since the start of the year. You see the 2 categories there, and Chris just talked about those different categories. Here's a breakdown of our expenses since the start of the year. We paid an accountant a little bit of money to help us with our taxes. The bulk of the banking fees turns out to be the percentage cut that PayPal and Google take on the transaction processing. The meeting and travel expenses are there. We have a deposit of $5,000 on, I think it's NANOG 56. Is that right? So that's at least a year out, and so on. Here are the account balances as of the end of last month. Yeah, the 6 here on the Aaron loan, the 6 cents comes because we earn about a penny interest every month on that account. It's a high yield interest rate account. Yeah. So overall, we're looking pretty good. We're about where we expect to be in terms of money at this point in the organization, and we're confident that going forward everything is going to be just great. I believe that's my last slide. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Betty Burke. I am going to present the Finance Committee report. Dan Golding is actually the chair of the committee, so I'm hoping that he's comfortable with all these slides and what I'm going to say. The Finance Committee has 6 members on the committee, and it is a standing committee as appointed or identified under the bylaws. I think it's important, again, just with transparency, because the NANOG budget is out on the webpage, to let the community know how the Finance Committee put the budget together. We put the budget that you see based on a lot of assumptions based on previous reports that we had access to. So we put a budget together, and we were not dealing with a whole lot of facts because we were a new organization. We were dealing with historical data and trying to make that data mold into the way we wanted NANOG to operate going forward. That's where we're dealing with reality. The reality is that we had a tax return that we did for 2010, so we have a much better understanding of our revenue and expense because we did a report and we had to deal with that. And we'll know more about how the budget needs to model differently because of NANOG 52. NANOG 52 is the first meeting that NANOG is completely responsible for all of the expense and, of course, receives the revenue. The nice thing to report, and Sylvie will identify this more in the event slide as she reports on the logistics of the meeting, is that we're on track. So while the budget report that's on the website, again, was made on some assumptions, the thing about it is we understood those assumptions, and they're pretty close to reality, and we're on track, which is really, really good to know. Some of the concerns, I think, going forward that the Finance Committee is going to have to deal with, and we're always watching these. The Finance Committee is an important committee so that finance issues and planning isn't dealt with just by the board, but there's actually a committee of the community that's advising the board on budget matters. It's always a goal to break even for events, and we want to build a reserve. So as we deal with the budget and we do planning, those are paramount issues for us. The other element, and you'll hear about some of this information in later slides, is we need to plan for change, right? The reason that the community wants to own NANOG is because all of you in your current employment fields have changed, and you have to have a budgeting process that anticipates that change. And so one of the things going forward that the Finance Committee will be doing is dealing with that planning for change. Oh, and I guess now we're to Sylvie.
Yep.
Playing musical chair. Okay, so we stood before you a year ago and we presented our first budget, so we thought you'd be curious to know what have we done in a year and how are we tracking against this budget. So in terms of events, we have been dealing with a professional meeting planner who negotiates the hotel contracts for us. And this comes at no expense to us at all. Hotels give a commission to meeting planners, and that's so the hotel pays basically our guy to negotiate the space for us. We have been doing a new memorandum of understanding for hosting. So we have a new hosting model that is in place starting at NANOG 54. So in our next fiscal year. So for the next fiscal year in the new model, we are already on board and we have hotels contracted for NANOG 54 in February 2012, and Telex will be our sponsor and host. NANOG 55 in June 2012 will be in Canada. We have a host that hasn't signed yet but will, and we have a choice of 2 venues. This will be concluded by the end of the month. NANOG 56 will be in Dallas, and we have Terramark as the host. And NANOG 57 is in February, and we are currently reviewing hotel RFPs to our meetings. So where are we? So we presented to you for NANOG 52. Last year we presented you a budget for the fiscal year of 2011, and we said, okay, for 52, 53, what does it look like? We're pretty much on target. Really, really happy to say that. So we'll be contributing to the reserve in 52 and also contributing to the reserve in 53. Meeting planning. We were talking as a board and with Dave and PC, and there's a few things that we wanted to discuss about how do we plan events like this to be more transparent and let you know what are the constraints that we have to work around, and perhaps you have good ideas and suggestions. So first off is beyond 2012. As a community and as members, we need to think, do we still want to continue to have 3 meetings per year, or should we switch to a 2 meeting per year? That's up for discussion, and we would really like to hear your views on this. Perhaps after on the open mic session, if you want to comment on this, please do. Something that would be very useful, like I've been the de facto meeting planner for the past year, is we need, as an organization, a way to take your pulse as members. So help us plan the logistics. We need to know how to contact you. We did not want to use the mailing list because we thought that this was off topic. So what should we use as a medium? How can we ask you, will you attend to this place? Do you need a room? This and that. These are useful data for us to negotiate the contracts with the hotels. Just so that you know, when you contract and when you make an event in a hotel like this, because we secure a room block, so we guarantee 1,000 nights for the hotel, they provide all this meeting space for free. So we guarantee room block, and we also guarantee that we will spend actually a ton of money on food and beverage. When you walk into a hotel, you cannot walk with food. You have to take their food. These rates are they're posted, they're listed, and they're quite hard to negotiate. So as you can imagine, nothing's really cheap in a hotel. Plus, we have service charges and taxes that add on. So it adds up pretty quickly. I wanted also to let you know that these hotel contracts are contracted 12 to 16 months out. So you've seen the other slides. We're contracted until 56. We're closing 57. So we need to take a forward view 2 years ahead and say, how many rooms will we need? So we need to make a good guess. So it'd be very helpful to have your pulse on this and say, if we make a meeting over in this city, will you attend? Or what's the likelihood of you attending? And then we can gauge a proper room block. Room blocks. Who here was not able to secure a room in this hotel? Sorry about that. There's another event on the 14th, which takes also a lot of room. We fully used our block. Like, we're over our block. We actually got more rooms than we contracted. So we've been fortunate. But we understand that this was not enough for some of you. You had to find a room in a different hotel. So again, helping us to plan the meetings and having more data points on how many of you will come, how large should we secure the block, will be useful, and then we can get the best deal for you. Food and beverage. I put the answer, but anyway. We have generous sponsors, and they contribute roughly $200 per attendee to give you 3 breakfasts, all your breaks, coffee all day, beer and gear and cocktail and everything. It adds up. If you think of the value of coming to a NANOG meeting, when you file your expense reports, all you have to do is your plane ticket, your 3 or 4 nights, and what the registration, and probably very minimal on the food, because a lot of it is provided by generous sponsors. So thank them, use it. We've had people say before that there was waste. So this time around, we're trying a new model. We were a little more conservative on the quantities. So let us know if we made a mistake. We introduced different things. We said we'll get refreshments all through the day. We had comments that you wanted water, coffee all through the day. We have it there. We've also made a green choice. You won't see too many cans. You won't see too many single servings. These cost an arm and a leg. They're like $6, $7 a piece just to be on the table. So you will see big jugs. You can serve. So we're thinking we're doing something green. It's also helping the cost. Let us know what you think. We're trying a whole lot of different things. Hopefully we won't lack food. If we do, let us know. Let us know what you like to eat, exactly what options you would like us to provide, and we'll provide. You're the members. This is your event. We need to answer your needs. All right, thank you.
I'm just going to give you a quick update on some of the big tasks that I've been working on since coming on board as the executive director in January. A lot of my time has been spent on the RFPs for the Association Management Company that Steve mentioned earlier, AMS, and working to help AMS in the last few months understand what we need to do to transition the current NANOG website, NANOG mail lists, build for the election process, and all of the kinds of things that we've had in the past but have been managed under merits provisioning for us. And we need now to have AMS be responsible for those things. So I've been doing a lot of logistical interface with both their administrative staff and their technical staff with support from Mike Smith. I'm really, really excited. Our goal by the end of June, which is not far away, to have all of the website, current nanog.org, in its entirety. All of the history, all of the information, all of the links working, so everything, just like you have today, works on a machine at AMS. And we are in the process of transitioning the mail list. The website's already moved. We're testing all of the links now. There are some things that aren't working because some of the links are hard-coded into information that rests on machines in Ann Arbor. And so until we make our own registration system, for instance, and some of the other things, some of those links just aren't going to work until we start populating NANOG 53. But it's really, really rewarding to know that a lot of hard work by the AMS staff, and certainly by Mike Smith and some of the members of the board, we did make the transition. Things are working. AMS is providing us hot backups as well as servers in 2 redundant data center locations. So we shouldn't have in the future any kind of downtime because of machine failure. We've really got a good base with them. We're currently reviewing the mail list issues. Right now, Mailman on servers in Ann Arbor are supporting our conversations and our archives, and we'll be moving into a new tool set called Arrow at AMS on their machines. So I can't report that we're done, but I'm not worried that it won't be done. Steve has asked for a little bit of extra time in case we're not done by the end of June so that we can keep the machines in Ann Arbor running should we need them. I will make sure to communicate with the community and keep you all apprised of any changes or any hiccups along the way. Our goal is that July 12th, when we open registration, we'll be operating totally in the new environment. What this means to all of you is that the new registration process that you'll see for NANOG 53 is going to look different. Okay? Some of the historical data that we use right now for registration will not be coming over. We have to build that database fresh. And so you will probably have to create new credentials for NANOG 53 and enter in some new information about yourself for the registration process. That will be the last time. The new tool that we'll be using, Arrow at AMS, is very dynamic and will be able to make a lot more reports and a lot more functionality for you as a member of the community or even as an attendee, which is also a different kind of member. But we're very excited about the transition. One of the things that we didn't do in our bidding process from the RFP in February is settle on a technical meeting support vendor. The board and a number of the technical folks in the chairs group have been having a lot of discussion about what are the actual webcast requirements. It's easy for us to describe the networking requirements. You know, this is how you do this router and these switches, and this is how we connect to the commodity internet for routing fabric. I mean, those things are all pretty straightforward, and vendors can quote on that kind of gear to provide support. What caused us concern when we looked at the cost of the proposals was the webcast, the netcast, whatever label we want to put on it. The ability for folks who are not here in this venue with us to be able to participate or watch the meeting remotely. And it was either in our way of describing that need to the vendors or the vendors understanding our need and submitting a proposal to us that we all felt we could endorse. So given the confusion and the need to move forward, we simply did not decide. The goal is to, and their representatives from the vendors have been here talking with us, and as a board we have a lot of ideas about how to solve the problem, but we haven't solved it yet. We will be, by the end of the month, making a decision before us, and I think that it's important for all of you to provide input to the board about this idea that I just heard about it again, a reminder before I came here to the lectern was, well, you know, Betty, let's just get sponsors to give you some gear. Let's just get various hardware vendors to give you some gear, and then we'll just get volunteers to operate the network support. And I don't know about that one. One side of me says, well, yeah, you know, having been around the community for a long time, that's the way we used to do it. We used to have vendors provide gear. Some provided it long term, some provided it just for a meeting. And then we had to have whoever was in charge of the meeting, in this case it would be the executive director, to go out and herd the cats, the volunteers, to make sure that they were on hand to support the construction and operation of the network during the meeting, so that it was consistent for all of you. And I'm here to tell you that's not easy. So I worry in that model about using volunteers of the consistency, the fact for the membership as a whole to be able to come to the meeting and expect quality service, that the network and all of the other issues that you've come to enjoy just aren't issues because it's all taken care of. And that's why my vote thus far has been to deal with paid contractors. But because we haven't made a decision, it would be good to hear your input on that view. You've all been around as long as I have, and maybe longer, so I'm sure you have an opinion. Before I leave, because this is my next slide to share information with you, I would really like to take a moment and ask all of you, since this is the last meeting that we will have our NANOG Merit support staff here, if you could all please join me in giving them a round of applause and thanking them for their tireless effort. They've done a truly great job for all of you, and I think as a board, as we go through these proposals, we can really appreciate what they've done even more. Patrick.
As the board plays musical chairs. Apparently I'm supposed to speak to you about elections, so some of you who are members, you get to vote. Those of you who are not members don't get to vote, but you can fix that by going out there, giving somebody $100, and you can vote. Anyway, the elections, even though it doesn't specifically say so in the bylaws, we are going to pay attention to the term limits that were there at the old NANOG SC. This is why Joe very kindly did not run for re-election despite being a major contributor on the board, and why Steve is not going to run for re-election this year, and then I will not be up for re-election the next year, because we feel it's important to keep what the community wanted in spirit, even if it's not directly in the bylaws. Second bullet point I kind of already covered. Please go join as a member. You get $25 off. It really costs you $25 a year if you come to 3 NANOGs, because you get $25 off each entrance fee. And then you get to vote, and voting's good. At least that's what they told me when I grew up in America. There are some proposed bylaws changes. They'll be talked about by other people. And let's see, the timeline. We don't have an exact timeline yet. We do know when the election is going to be held, but we don't actually have a time for when the nominations and petitions will be open. We should have that timeline in July, right? Yes, we will announce in July when the timeline is. Be clear that what does not mean nominations open in July. That means we will tell you when nominations will open sometime in July. Then we'll go through the standard ballot. You can vote electronically. You don't have to be at the meeting. And then we'll get an election and the board results. And then shortly thereafter, usually the Wednesday morning of the NANOG, or Thursday morning of the NANOG after, the Thursday morning after the NANOG, the newly elected board gathers together and then selects the committee members. So that is the timeline of when things are done. So anybody have any questions? Good. Who here is not a member? Raise your hand. Okay, if you're sitting next to somebody who isn't a member, hit them. And then keep hitting them until they go out there and become a member. Raise your hand again. Oh, next, proposed bylaws. Sit over there.
How to make sausage. So in the past, the way that we did it was, ultimately Merit was responsible for everything. And that meant they had authority, but they also had all the responsibility for making sure everything came off really well. Steering committee was elected, and then they selected the program committee, communications committee, and development committee from a pool of people that volunteered. Then during the transition, we got this, which I won't go through point by point, but suffice it to say, it got very complicated because we're transitioning from where Merit was responsible for everything, where now we are responsible for everything. And it takes a lot of different people doing a lot of different kind of specialized tasks to build this new organization. So the question is, what are we going to do now that Merit's no longer going to be at the top of the chart here, and it's in fact it's us. So what we're proposing is the board of directors, which was the steering committee, which is this group here, executive director, which is Betty, and then instead of the old committee, some of the committees you'll see the same. The program committee, development committee are essentially the same as they have been forever. The finance committee, which we talked about a little bit in the bylaws, are the people that are going to be responsible for building all the budgetary stuff. And then the change would be the technical committee. Now in the past we had the communications committee, which was responsible for mailing list stuff, which includes kind of the day-to-day operations of the mailing list, any kind of actions we had to take, and then also with the help of Merit, taking care of things like subscriptions and all that. That's not a role that seems to be moving forward very well. Just since the last meeting, we've only had to really step in on 2 threads. So there is the question, do we even need to moderate the list anymore? And with the new Arrow system, all of the technical stuff that we had to do can now be accomplished as a technical task, not as a communications task. Which then kind of goes into this, which where the communications committee was before, the development committee would take over a lot of the roles for actual content. So Facebook, Twitter, all of those places where they need to actually get the message out about NANOG. The communications committee would go away, and the technical committee then becomes responsible for working with AMS to make sure all the kind of nuts and bolts and all the really fun stuff gets done so that everybody gets their mailing lists on time. And so this is the proposal for the way it would be going forward. And the reason I say it's sausage making is because as members we actually have to vote on this, say that this is the way that we want it to be, and then as of September when the board of directors selects, they'll be selecting into a new committee structure, not the old committee structure. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Oops, I done that. Okay, so back to me. So, while I'm up here, I'd like to ask those of you who were at NANOG 49 in San Francisco a year ago to think about what that community meeting was like and reflect on what's changed since then and what we've accomplished. Last time there was a lot of discussion at the mics, a lot of people asking us if we were insane. I hope we've answered some of those questions in the last year. With that said, I would like to open it up and ask you to tell us again if you think we're insane. Bill.
Yeah, there were a lot of questions that were asked during the presentations.
Who are you?
My name is Bill Norton. I am a NANOG member. The first comment, and there's only 3 here. The first comment was to Sylvie. You're trying new things. Thank you. I love that you're trying new things. And NANOG, I really would love to see the stepwise evolution and just try things, see what happens. Maybe things will work out, maybe they won't, but I love that you're trying new things. The funding, it looks good. My hat's off to Chris Casada. My gosh, all those sponsors that you got, you came through. I'm just really, really impressed with that. And it sounds like things are going smoothly, which brings me to the second point. The question was asked about the form of this community meeting. Maybe we don't need so many of the details. I mean, it's almost an hour through, and you guys have done almost all of the talking. If you really want the community meeting to be a discussion, the suggestion would be put out the information, maybe with some narrative text and the spreadsheets, and have that up on the web, and give us a week to digest it, and maybe then suggest to you some agenda items that we would like to hear discussed. And then more of this could be community feedback and discussion. For example, one of the questions was, what would you like to see in the community meeting, or what would you like to see in the locations? That might be a good topic to have in advance, so we can kind of noodle on it and think about how we would discuss that in this forum. And then the last one had to do with locations. You're asking the question, 2 years out, are we going to go to Memphis? And that's a really tough question to ask, but I think if you go back and you look at all of the attendee stats that we have for all the different locations throughout the 50-some NANOGs that we've done, I think you're going to find there are 3 categories. There are those of us regulars who go to any NANOG wherever it happens to be, and that's a chunk you can just count on. There are those who are local. We'll go to those that are close by. So that's where you get the San Francisco effect, where you're always going to have 600 people showing up because it's San Francisco. So you can count on that data. And then there's like, a 20 or 30 or 40% of newbies who have never been to an NANOG before. And if you add those up together, I think you can come up with some pretty good ideas of what the location and population is going to look like. So that's it.
Thank you, Bill. Jared, who are you?
Hi, Jared Mach from NTT. I only have 7 things here on my list.
Number 1.
They're actually pretty quick. So, these are sort of in response to a lot of the questions that were asked. The first 2 are for Sylvie. One, as it relates to the room block. Do you think that we're going to be able to... I know there's a delicate balance involved there in trying to hit the right number. Do you think as we're getting further out in some of the planning and stuff that we're going to be able to go more public with where the hotels are, 12, 13 months in advance? Such that people can go ahead and help you fulfill those room block commitments early with the reservations? Because I think there's a lot of people who wait instantly and then will go and block out those rooms, even when they don't have their final travel plans done. And the second one is just sort of on the food. I think that it would probably be better to send out a broader email message regarding some of the food survey type stuff, as opposed to the people in this room, because there's a lot of people who aren't in this room, and actually asking at the breakfast might be a great thing for tomorrow.
Just a second.
Okay.
So on that, what would be...
Yeah, I think you have to push the button maybe.
Oh, push the button. Right. On how to get the information out to the attendees, what would be the medium? The mailing list, another mailing list that we call members at? What's appropriate?
I think that you just have to make it part of the survey, to be honest. Is probably going to be a good way to get feedback on the food if you guys are soliciting that. I think the survey will be a good place. I know historically speaking the response rate's not been great, but if you say, please complain about the food, I'm sure there will be somebody who will. Unfortunately, it kind of works that way. I had two other things. These are more just statements. For remote participation, as well as for the slides, I think yes on remote participation, and on the slides, if you presented them, I don't really think you can really retract them. If somebody's going to get in trouble with their HR or PR, press department, that's kind of their fault for getting up and presenting without clearance. It's not your job to babysit people at their job. Betty.
So, Jared, just on that one, when you submit a talk, there's click this thing and it says permission to record it. So, maybe we just should take that off and just put a disclaimer saying this will be recorded.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair.
Yeah.
I submitted something for a lightning talk, and I think that's absolutely fair that, if I present something here, it's going to be public. Even though this isn't technically a public property or location.
So I agree with that, but by virtue of the fact that click box was there at one time, not everybody thought that, right? So that's why we're trying to understand it.
I understand. I think we're at the point in the process where we can say, you are going to be webcast, you are going to be archived, which leads into my next thing with for Betty. I think one, contractors. I think that's going to be the right way to go. I think that's a good use of the money to be able to essentially enforce SLAs. When people are volunteering, you can't really enforce an SLA. With the contract, you absolutely can with a contractor. I think that's worked out in the past really well with some of the people who've combination volunteered as well as done contract work. Historically, when I was part of the SC, I recall that we had some really good experiences with some people. I think that's a great way to do that. My other comment would be, as far as it relates to the content and the broadcast of it, you can probably ask some of the people here who work for CDNs if they'd be willing to engage in a special low-cost contract for you. I really think that'd probably be the best way to sort of deal with that. And the last thing is for Mike. We have to moderate the mailing list. I wish that every single person would be adult enough to be able to do that, but I don't believe that we're in a position ever where we will be able to remove any sort of moderation. That's it.
Thanks, Jared.
Thank you, Jared.
Michael.
If nobody else brings it up, I want to bring up the two.
Michael Sinatra, ESNet. I have just a quick set of experiences about the remote presentations. I've actually given a remote presentation at an Internet 2 member meeting, and I've actually seen lots of remote presentations at various Internet 2 meetings. They can be okay. They're rarely really good, and they can be quite bad at times. If you're the presenter, it's very hard to get feedback from your audience. Normally you see who is sleeping, who is looking, who's nodding at you, who is reaching for their barf bag, and you can tune your presentation appropriately. That's impossible to do, or it's very, very hard to do. You sometimes get a screen with a view of the people who look like they're about 8 miles away, and you can't really get a good feedback from your audience. Oftentimes what has happened is the sound is bad or something's wrong. Usually if you're in the room, you can tell very quickly. If you're not in the room, the moderator, you might see them jumping up and down somewhere in front of the camera trying to get your attention. I've seen cases where the moderator has not been able to get the attention of the person giving the remote presentation because that person had muted the audience, so it was just went on and on and on. So it is possible to do them okay. All other things being equal, I would certainly lean toward local presentations, live presentations. Yes, strong preference, all other things being equal. But you know, if it's a case of a really, really, really interesting remote presentation versus a really, really, really boring local presentation, then you know, maybe you can make an exception there. And the other thing, just try to standardize what people are using. I know Internet 2 uses video, but sometimes if you have someone doing a remote presentation with Skype, someone's using video, someone's using WebEx or something like that, it can be a complete mess technically to try to deal with that. So one of the things that maybe gets into the volunteers versus paid people may have paid contractors may have a solution that they have that's already sort of prepackaged. They can send out clients to the remote presenters and they can work with that. So that might be one way to solve the problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy.
Hi, Kathy Aronson. I'm on the program committee. So I have a question for everybody. So what if there's this really great presentation and it's by, say, a government agency, and the only way that they'll present it to this audience is if it's not recorded, and it's really something that everybody might want to hear? Do we turn it down because they don't want to be recorded, or do we let them present? I'm just asking.
I think that the program committee should have the latitude to do as they please. I'm answering because she said everybody in the room, and I count.
Mm-hmm.
Can't hear you.
Use a microphone. We're being what?
Okay. Yes. Sorry. This is Jared Mach again. I think if they're willing to give it in the room, and it's still going to be live webcast, correct? So we're going to turn off the webcast for remote participants for this, for the one session, and black it out and say this has been blacked out by the government. I think that if they're willing to give the presentation, they should be able to figure out how to get the appropriate clearances for it to be broadcast. This isn't really this is more than likely something where I've done these types of things before where I've said, here's some data I'm presenting, and by the way, I'm presenting it to the people in the room because I can see the people in the room, and I can see there's not a reporter in the room, but it may be something where I haven't gotten the appropriate clearance to present that type of information. And I think the challenge here is that if they're going to go ahead and do this, and they need to get the right clearances to present it, you know, maybe we need to take their session in the next NANOG because they have to go through their press office and take enough time. No, actually, I think in this case, they're pretty much exactly the same thing because you're talking about present includes a live webcast. The NANOG meetings are currently webcast. So you're proposing changing the meetings from being a live webcast to now we're going to black out a session. That is not something I feel I can support.
I personally think that you have two separate forums. You have this public forum where people stand up and present to the group, and that has been webcast and that ought to be webcast. And I don't like the idea of turning off the cameras. At the same time, we do have another forum. We have these BOFs where people can get together, and that isn't cast. And that might be an appropriate forum for something that requires this type of sensitivity.
Okay, Iris.
Rob Seedstrom. Since I'm sitting up here, it should be pretty obvious that I'm on the board. I have a hard time to the point of the discussions about, well, you know, what if hypothetically the government, somebody from some three-letter agency wanted to come and this, that, and the other and not want it to be webcast. I have a hard time envisioning such a situation would actually materialize, and I would hope that we would push back on that as hard as we possibly could, because I think that anything that's worth getting out to our members here is worth getting out to anyone who couldn't attend.
Rob, this has happened, so that's why they're asking.
Oh, it has? Okay. Yeah. My bad. I was checked out on that one.
Okay, so look, it has happened. So we're not discussing a hypothetical. I think it's a perfectly reasonable question, and we should get some community feedback. I still think that the program committee should be allowed to do whatever they want.
That is agreed. Hi, Sonia Sakovich on the program committee. That is happening this session, and the FCC talk tomorrow is not going to be streamed or will not be recorded. They've asked for that because they're discussing their open internet order, and they don't want anyone to misunderstand or to have different takes on their content discussed outside the meeting. So that is happening, and we have agreed to support that as the program committee this time. But the question has come up because we want to know what people think about doing that in the future.
Non-duplication blackout.
At the back.
This is Bill Fenner. I've been involved in other organizations where we try to, you know, the gut reaction to anything is to make a rule, make an absolute rule, instead of just giving the leadership the power and to make their own judgment calls and to select people with good judgment for these committees. You know, it's like guidelines, okay, guidelines are that, you know, you push very strongly back against someone who says this, you know, this is not to be archived or streamed, but let them make the judgment. You know, that's why we have these committees, because we want them to make the judgments about what's a good talk. We want them to make the judgment about what's a good program. If they make the judgment that this is a good program, despite the disadvantage that it won't be seen by remote members and it won't be archived for the future, let them make the judgment. Don't take away their ability to make this call that we've asked them to make.
Thank you. That was what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, I'll follow up, add to that too as well. As a board member, I don't like making absolute rules that affect how other committees do their jobs. Unless a lawyer tells us we have to do something a certain way, or somebody tells us we have to do something a certain way, leaving the discretion to the people who know what they're doing seems like the right move to me. Joe.
Joe Provo, speaking for myself. Just wanted to observe that the FCC for this meeting is under the current regime where they had a tick box to choose. So that's a non-issue. And in a future where there is no tick box, then I'm going to pain, as much as it pains me, I agree with Patrick, we wish the program committee to be enabled to actually make the decisions and not micromanage them.
Hey, Charles Gucker, One Step. I understand and I'm sympathetic to both sides of the discussion. On one hand, you want it to be free and everyone have access to it. On the other side, you want the people to actually present. I believe we're asking the wrong question in regards to presenting the data in the fact that if the presentation is being made to the members, it should be made available to the members. Whether or not we put authentication on before you can view it in the archive, or if it's open for the public, it's a relatively easy compromise in understanding how can someone gain access to it. Just putting it on YouTube is very different than having it password protected as part of the members.
Good point.
Hi, my name's Dennis with Link Technologies. I'm actually also on the board of directors with WISPA, which is the Wireless Internet Service Provider Alliance. And a lot of the concerns that you guys have been talking about today, or the past 3 years, we've been dealing with. One question was, how do you get notices out to members? On our organization, all of our members are joined to a mailing list called announcements. The only people that can send emails out is a board member. That's the simplest way for us to communicate with our membership as a whole. Just giving you an idea. On the current topic of recording, in our organization, we actually encourage member participation in any and all committees. If you're a member, you are allowed to join a committee, either participate actively or simply read all of the emails, and if you have your comment, you can put that in. Obviously, we only have so many people that will vote on that. We only take the voting members as 50%. If they vote 51%, there's 20 people. That's fine. Other topics, like some of our FCC work we do, we'll have 100 members voting. But in that particular case, and in the particular case of the program committee, I would just say it's really up to the committee to decide if that presentation is of a good enough quality to warrant the blackout. Also, on the comment of the private data, we actually host a quite large wiki with a lot of everything from SLA contracts that our members can use to tower contract, customer contracts, dedicated contacts in our industry to get a hold of tower owners, things like that. All that information is password protected in our wiki currently so that we don't give out all that information. So that might actually be a really good idea for your recordings as well, and that also might alleviate the ideal of making something completely open and public and only giving it to the membership. If you want to drive your membership, you have to give them something that they don't have access to freely. On another comment on the video streaming, one of the reasons why I came here is because not everything is streamed, and I'm probably going to continue to come because of that. We actually do a number of shows. We do zero streaming of any of our shows. And the exact reason is why come to the show and help us build revenue for our organization if you don't have to. If you can pay nothing and watch the stream live and get your data. I do understand that there's certain streams that you don't get all the quality, but that's why you want to be at the live shows so that you can ask those questions. If you're coming in on a web chat or a simulcast, etc., you're not going to get all that data. So definitely getting the membership in the seats is very difficult. The last comment I had is another gentleman asked about getting room reservations and blocking out blocks of time. In our experience, about 65% of all of our participants to our shows sign up within 3 weeks of the show and actually book their hotel rooms then. And a lot of hotels, they pretty much put off either 1 month or 2 weeks in advance of the actual show is whenever they do not guarantee rooms anymore. So it is extremely difficult to balance that number. And getting the number lower than having too many rooms that aren't filled is a heck of a lot better than the alternative. Thank you.
Thanks. One thing I'll point out on the room block thing is that it is a guarantee. If we promise to fill a certain number of rooms and we don't fill that number of rooms, then we're on the hook for it, and we have to pay regardless. So that's why it's a balance, and why we can't just say we'll take the whole hotel and not worry about it later. One other topic that I haven't heard anybody mention, Patrick reminded me about, is the 2 versus 3 meetings a year thing. I may be opening up a whole other can of worms that'll keep us away from our party. But if you have ideas on that, please let us know either tonight or over the next few months. We're not going to make a quick decision on that. It has to be done with the full input from the community, as well as the Budget Finance Committee to tell us what's feasible. But over the years, we've been hearing for a long time that there is some group of people who would prefer coming to 2 meetings a year rather than 3, or they can only come to 2, or whatever. So let us know what you think on that, please. And I'll ask last call if there are any comments or questions. Please come up to a mic.
Patrick Gilmore, Akamai Technologies. I think we should have 2 meetings a year. Doesn't anybody want to argue with me? Because if not, we can just change it. I'm good with that.
I think we should have 3. I think we should stay at 3.
Okay, steel cage deathmatch.
Jared.
All right, this is Jared Mach again, former SC when it was the old regime. So this was a frequent topic of discussion back then. I think that you're going to come to the exact same conclusion that we've come to through all the years of community debate so far, which is that no op. Thank you.
Thanks, Jared. All right, last chance. All right, thank you, I guess. We didn't have any rotten tomatoes thrown at us today, which is a great thing. Thanks for being here. Thanks for giving us the input. And please, talk to us and you see us around in the hallways. We definitely want to hear what you have to say. And go to the social, yes. So, and yes, it's sponsored. So show support to our sponsor by going there and drinking their free booze. So thank you very much.